A millionaire swore to divorce his wife if she wasn't a virgin, but on their first night, Alex Holt sat in silence, his steel-gray eyes fixed on the Manhattan skyline beyond the towering glass windows of his penthouse office. The amber liquid in his glass caught the dim office light as he swirled it absently, his mind far from the familiar ritual of end-of-day scotch. His father's attorney had just delivered an ultimatum from beyond the grave. "Mr. Holt, per the final amendment to your father's will, in order to obtain the remaining 40% of Holt Industries voting shares, you must be legally married within the next 6 months." Alex's jaw tightened. He should have known his father wouldn't relinquish control so easily, even in death. "And do I at least get to choose my own bride?" he asked, voice cold, detached. On the other end of the line, Gregory Blackwell, a man who had spent 3 decades orchestrating the elder Holt's legal maneuvers, cleared his throat. "Your father had a candidate in mind." Of course he did. A name appeared on Alex's screen. Elysia Sinclair, the only daughter of Winston Sinclair, founder of Sinclair Technologies, a telecommunications empire spanning multiple continents. Their fathers had spent years negotiating this union, envisioning a corporate dynasty forged through marriage. Alex took a slow sip of his drink, studying the woman in the attached profile photo. Dark, flowing hair, smooth, sun-kissed skin, eyes sharp with intelligence, and an edge that warned against underestimation. She didn't look like someone who played the role of a pawn easily. "I want a meeting," he said. Elysia Sinclair stepped into the private dining room of Le Jardin, exuding the effortless confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime maneuvering through boardrooms and high-stakes negotiations. Draped in deep sapphire silk, she was elegance and power embodied. She didn't wear jewelry save for a single watch, understated, refined, practical. No excess, no distractions. Alex stood as she approached, a calculated display of courtesy. He had met countless beautiful women in his world, but there was something distinctly different about Elysia Sinclair. She didn't try to impress, she simply existed, unapologetically herself. She took her seat, locking eyes with him. "How poetic," she remarked, her tone cool, measured. "Even in death, our fathers still find ways to control us." Alex's lips curled in the ghost of a smirk. Control is relative. It depends on how we choose to approach it. Elysia leaned back slightly, studying him with quiet amusement. "And how do you plan to approach this, Alex? A convenient marriage for the sake of corporate dominance?" He set his glass down, leveling his gaze at her. "Do you have a better idea?" A slow smile curved her lips, not warm, not inviting. A challenge. "If we're doing this," she said, "we do it on my terms." Elysia Sinclair wasn't easily impressed. She had spent years negotiating with men like Alex Holt, men who were accustomed to power bending at their feet. But as she sat across from him, watching the way his sharp gaze dissected every word she spoke, she realized something. This wouldn't be easy. Good. She took a sip of her wine, her posture effortlessly composed. "If we're going to do this, there will be conditions." Alex studied her, swirling the remaining scotch in his glass. "I'm listening." Her lips quirked at his nonchalance. He might play indifferent, but she saw the way he leaned in just slightly, the way his fingers stilled on the rim of his glass. He was interested. 3 years, she stated. No more, no less. At the end of it, we dissolve the marriage quietly, and each of us walks away with what we came for. "And in those 3 years?" Alex asked, his voice smooth but laced with curiosity. "We maintain appearances," she continued, tilting her head slightly. "Publicly, we're the picture-perfect couple. Private events, press interviews, corporate galas, we do them together. But behind closed doors, we live separate lives. No expectations, no obligations." A muscle flickered in his jaw. Defined separate lives. She smiled. Separate bedrooms, separate schedules. I won't interfere with your business, and you won't interfere with mine. He exhaled through his nose, a short, quiet laugh. You're assuming I have any interest in your business. Alicia arched an eyebrow. A CEO with a lack of curiosity? That would be disappointing. His smirk returned, slower this time. You enjoy testing people, don't you? I enjoy setting the terms before someone else tries to. Silence stretched between them for a moment, charged and unyielding. Alex had built his empire on control, on ensuring that every factor, every variable, fell into place exactly as he dictated. But Alicia Sinclair was a different kind of variable, one he hadn't accounted for. He leaned back, fingers tapping idly against the table. Fine. 3 years, public unity, private autonomy. She lifted her glass slightly in silent agreement. There's one more thing, he added, before she could take a victory sip. Of course there is. She set her glass down, waiting. My father's will requires the marriage to be... He paused, his gaze flicking to hers. Legitimate, in every sense. Alicia's expression didn't change, but he saw the flicker of understanding in her eyes. You're concerned about appearances, she deduced. Worried that if we don't act the part behind closed doors, someone will call this marriage into question? I'm concerned with securing what's mine, Alex corrected smoothly. Alicia held his gaze, then shrugged. Fine, we'll put on a convincing show when necessary. But there's one rule I won't compromise on. He waited. Fidelity, she said simply. I don't care about love, passion, or any of the illusions people cling to. But while this arrangement lasts, I won't be humiliated by headlines of my husband with other women. Alex chuckled, shaking his head slightly. You're worried about my fidelity? She gave him a pointed look. Your reputation precedes you. He studied her for a long moment, then nodded. Agreed, but I expect the same in return. Her lips curled slightly, just shy of amusement. Of course. A pause. Then we have a deal, he murmured, extending his hand. Alicia glanced down at it before clasping it firmly, her grip steady and unflinching. Deal, she echoed. The agreement was set. Neither of them realized in that moment that this was the easy part. The wedding was perfect, at least that's what the media called it. The ceremony took place at St. Patrick's Cathedral, a spectacle crafted for the society pages. The air was thick with whispered admiration as Alicia walked down the aisle, draped in an exquisite custom-made Vera Wang gown that sculpted her figure like art. A cathedral-length veil billowed behind her, catching the golden afternoon light as if she were something celestial. Alex stood at the altar, waiting, watching. For a man who had orchestrated billion-dollar acquisitions without so much as a flicker of emotion, this moment should have been just another transaction, a necessary step toward securing what was his. Yet when Winston Sinclair placed Alicia's hand in his, something unexpected settled in Alex's chest. A weight, a responsibility, an unfamiliar sensation he refused to name. Alicia's fingers were steady in his grip, no hesitation, no tremor of nerves. Her dark eyes met his with quiet defiance, as if daring him to regret this arrangement. He wouldn't, not ever. The vows were recited flawlessly, each word crafted by publicists, perfected by image consultants. I take you, Alicia, to be my lawfully wedded wife. I take you, Alex, to be my lawfully wedded husband. A kiss to seal the deal, just long enough to be convincing, just short enough to remain impersonal. And then it was done. The headlines the next morning would declare it the wedding of the year. The ballroom shimmered with opulence, crystal chandeliers casting soft light over tables adorned with white orchids and black calla lilies. A string quartet played in the background, barely heard over the hum of New York's elite toasting the Union. Alex and Alicia moved through the crowd with effortless precision, the perfect couple. His hand rested at the small of her back, a possessive gesture that to outsiders seemed romantic. Only Alicia felt the tension in his fingers, the calculated pressure, the subtle control. "You're rather convincing," she murmured as they glided across the dance floor. "I've always excelled at persuasion." His voice was low, smooth. She looked up at him, her lips curving slightly. "Tell me, Alex, has anyone ever truly known you beyond this performance?" His expression didn't shift, but something in his eyes flickered. Asks the woman who just married a stranger. Touché. The silence was deafening. The city stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Alex's penthouse, but inside, the atmosphere was thick with unspoken rules and unacknowledged truths. Alicia slipped off her heels, instantly losing 3 inches of height, but none of her presence. She moved toward the window, staring out at the world she had just tied herself to. Alex poured 2 glasses of bourbon, offering her one. "2 successful ventures," she said, raising the glass. "To clarity," he countered, his voice carrying something unreadable. She turned slightly, eyebrow raised. "Clarity?" He studied her for a long moment before taking a measured sip of his drink. "The contract requires a genuine marriage, not just a legal one." Alicia set her glass down with careful precision. "You're worried about the consummation clause." "I'm concerned with authenticity," he corrected. She exhaled sharply, shaking her head. "Let me understand this clearly. On our wedding night, you're questioning my what exactly? My morality? My honesty?" "I'm ensuring this marriage meets all contractual requirements." Alicia's gaze darkened, her fingers tightening around her glass. "By questioning whether I'm a virgin?" Alex remained composed, unreadable. "Previous entanglements could invalidate the inheritance clause." She laughed, but there was no humor in it. Unbelievable. When she turned away, he caught her wrist, his grip firm but not forceful. "This is business." Alicia's eyes met his, blazing with something dangerously close to fury. "And I am not a business asset to be verified, Alex." A long silence stretched between them, electric with tension. Then, with deliberate calm, she pulled her hand free and reached for the diamond wedding ring still wrapped around her finger. She slid it off and placed it on the sleek marble countertop between them. "When you're ready to begin this marriage with respect instead of suspicion," she said, voice eerily quiet, "you may return this to me." Then, without another word, she turned and walked away, disappearing into the guest suite, leaving Alex alone with the weight of what he had just done. Outside, New York glittered, indifferent to the storm that had just erupted within its tallest towers. The ring sat exactly where she had left it, a stark reminder of his own miscalculation. He wasn't used to losing, but this wasn't just a loss. This was a failure, a war he hadn't prepared for, and for the first time in his life, he had no idea how to fix it. 3 days had passed since his wife, his business partner, had walked away from their wedding night, leaving behind more than just a diamond band. She had left behind a challenge, a warning. And now, in the sterile silence of their penthouse, Alex found himself haunted by it. He hadn't seen Alicia since that night. She had gone about her schedule as if nothing had happened, moving between meetings, interviews, and philanthropic events with the same effortless grace as before. She was flawless in public. And yet, when they crossed paths in the penthouse, brief, fleeting moments in hallways or shared spaces, she was colder than ice. Not angry, not hostile, just absent. And Alex Holt was not accustomed to being ignored. He exhaled sharply and turned away from the ring, shoving his frustration aside. Instead, he focused on the folder sitting on his desk, the file his private investigator had delivered earlier that day. A background check on Alicia Sinclair. It wasn't that he didn't trust her. No, that would imply an emotional investment he refused to acknowledge. This was about control, about understanding the variables in his carefully constructed world. But as he flipped through the pages, something in his stomach twisted. There were whispers, rumors from her time in South Africa, a supposed relationship with a high-ranking diplomat, one who had been married at the time, a grainy photo, a blurred figure exiting a hotel late at night. Her name tied, however loosely, to a scandal that had nearly derailed an international trade deal. Circumstantial, unverified. But in Alex's world, rumors rarely materialized from nothing. His fingers tightened around the edge of the page. She had walked away from him, left her wedding ring behind, as if he was the one who had something to prove. And yet, here was her past, full of carefully buried secrets. His decision was made before he even realized it. Alicia had just poured herself a glass of wine when she heard the door open behind her. She didn't turn. She knew it was him. For 3 days, she had given Alex nothing but distance, and he had done the same. But now, as he entered the penthouse with the kind of measured, deliberate movements that always preceded something unpleasant, she felt the shift in the air. "I assume you found what you were looking for," she said coolly, taking a sip of her wine. A beat of silence. Then, "You knew this was coming." His voice was quiet but laced with something sharp. Now she turned, meeting his gaze. He held a folder in one hand, his fingers gripping the edges tightly, as if he were restraining himself from throwing it onto the counter between them. Her file. A slow exhale left her lips. "Let me guess. You found some conveniently planted rumors about my past, a scandal manufactured by men with more power than conscience." Alex's jaw flexed. "You don't deny it." She tilted her head. "Deny what exactly? That I existed in the same vicinity as a married ambassador? That I once left a hotel alone at night and someone decided that was proof of an affair?" He didn't answer. She laughed, soft, humorless. "My past is inconvenient for you, isn't it?" Alex's expression remained unreadable, but his silence spoke louder than words. Alicia took another sip of wine, letting it settle on her tongue before she spoke again. "And tell me, Alex, why does this matter so much to you? Because if I recall correctly, this was just a transaction, wasn't it?" Something flickered in his eyes, something dangerous. He stepped forward. "This marriage was conditioned on legitimacy, and if I find out that—" "You'll what?" She cut him off, her voice suddenly quieter, sharper. His fingers curled into fists at his sides. "If I find out this contract is voided by deception, I will walk away, without hesitation." A long silence stretched between them, and then Alicia smiled, slow, icy. "Oh. Then walk away, Alex." She reached for something on the counter, her wedding ring, still sitting where she had left it 3 days ago. She picked it up, held it between 2 fingers, and then she set it back down. "When you're ready to trust me instead of investigating me," she murmured, echoing the words from their wedding night. "Then you can return this to me." Alex's chest rose and fell with measured control, his expression carved from stone. But she wasn't done. She moved toward him, closing the space between them with slow, deliberate steps, stopping just close enough that he could feel the warmth of her body. Then she leaned in, her lips a whisper away from his ear. "Until then, you are the one who has something to prove." With that, she stepped back, turning on her heel and walking toward the bedroom. Not their bedroom, her bedroom. A moment later, the door clicked shut behind her. Alex stood there, staring at the empty space she had left behind. He should have been angry. He should have walked away right then and there. But instead, for the first time in his life, Alex Holt found himself utterly, entirely off balance. And he hated it. The penthouse felt colder without her. Alex wouldn't acknowledge it, not to himself, not to anyone. But for the past 2 days, the absence of Alicia's presence had settled into the space like an unspoken challenge. She hadn't left completely, no. She still lived there, still moved through the same halls, still sat in the same rooms. But she had withdrawn into herself, locked behind an invisible barrier that he couldn't seem to breach. And for the first time in his life, Alex Holt found himself on the losing side of a negotiation. He had always believed power was measured in control, in ensuring every outcome bent to his will. But Alicia had walked away from him, not physically, but in every way that mattered. And that was something he hadn't accounted for. Then, without warning, she was gone, a single note left on the marble counter. Taking some time away, don't follow me. No location, no explanation. And that was unacceptable. The storm was coming. The sky hung heavy with impending rain, the air thick with the electric charge of something inevitable. Alex stood outside a sprawling lakeside estate, his expression unreadable as he watched the dark clouds gather over the horizon. The house belonged to the Sinclair family, one of their private retreats, secluded and untouched by the outside world. And inside, Alicia. He had found her easily enough. For all her intelligence, for all her careful maneuvering, she had underestimated him. He had let her have her space. 5 days. Enough time to make a statement, but not long enough to disappear completely. He pushed open the front door without knocking. The house was warm, filled with the quiet hum of a storm approaching. And there she was, standing by the window, barefoot, arms crossed loosely over her chest. She didn't turn when she spoke. "I told you not to follow me." Alex took a measured step inside, his gaze steady. "You should know by now that I don't take orders." Alicia exhaled slowly, as if she had been expecting this. Finally, she turned to face him. "Why are you here, Alex?" "Because you ran." Her lips curved, not in amusement, but something closer to disappointment. "And that bothers you?" "Yes." He didn't say it. Instead, he stepped closer, until there were only a few feet between them. "You left without a word, without an explanation. I needed space. You needed control." His voice was quiet but sharp. "You hate being powerless. So do I." Alicia held his gaze, something flickering behind her eyes. Then, after a long moment, "There's a hurricane coming." "I know." "You should leave before it gets worse." "I'm not going anywhere." Silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken words. Outside, the wind howled against the house, rattling the glass. And then, something broke, not in the storm outside, but between them. Because suddenly, Alicia was no longer standing still. She was moving, stepping into his space with a fierceness that sent his pulse into overdrive. "You want an explanation?" she demanded. "Fine. I left because I refuse to be in a marriage where I'm constantly questioned, where every part of me is dissected, investigated, and put under a microscope." She was close now, so close he could see the fire in her eyes, the sharp rise and fall of her breath. "I won't live like that, Alex. I won't be a suspect in my own life." His jaw clenched. "You think I don't know that?" "Do you?" A beat of silence. Then, "I made a mistake." The words tasted foreign on his tongue. Alicia blinked, clearly startled by the admission. "What?" He exhaled through his nose, frustration simmering beneath his skin. "I made a mistake," he repeated. "I should have trusted you. I should have—" "Believed me," she finished for him. "Yes?" Outside, thunder rumbled in the distance. Inside, something shifted. Alicia studied him for a long moment, as if searching for cracks in his composure, for evidence that he wasn't being sincere. Then, finally, "I don't trust easily," she admitted. "Not anymore." "I know." More silence, more storm, and then a single step. Alicia moved closer, her gaze locked onto his, as if testing him. Alex didn't move, didn't reach for her, didn't take control. He let her decide, and when she finally leaned in, pressing her lips against his, it wasn't about power, it wasn't about control, it was about choice. And Alex Holt had never wanted anything more in his entire life. The rain had started falling in thick sheets, hammering against the windows as the wind howled around the lake house. Inside, the storm between them was far more dangerous. Alicia's lips were warm, soft, yet filled with an intensity that burned through him. Alex had expected resistance, had expected her to retreat at the last second, to remind him that this wasn't real. But she didn't. She kissed him like she had nothing left to lose. And that was what undid him. His hands moved instinctively, fingers ghosting over her waist, anchoring her against him. She tasted like wine and defiance, like a challenge wrapped in silk. For the first time in his life, Alex wasn't the one in control. And he didn't care. Then, as suddenly as she had leaned in, Alicia pulled away. The absence of her warmth was immediate, sharp, like being doused in ice water. Alex exhaled, chest rising and falling with measured restraint. He didn't move, didn't close the distance she had just created between them. This wasn't about him. It was about her. "Alicia," he started, his voice quieter now, lower. She shook her head, stepping back further, arms crossing over her chest. "That shouldn't have happened." He let out a short, humorless laugh. "I think we're past the point of pretending this marriage is just a contract." Her jaw tightened. "That's exactly what it is." "Alicia." His tone made her freeze. It wasn't commanding. It wasn't demanding. It was pleading. She swallowed, something flickering behind her eyes, something vulnerable she didn't want him to see. "I don't trust you, Alex." The words hit harder than they should have. And yet, as much as she wanted to hold on to that belief, a part of her wavered, because deep down she wanted to. He nodded once, slowly. "I know." A pause. Then, "I want to." That was worse. Alex had faced boardroom wars. He had crushed men twice his age with a single well-placed sentence. He had built an empire on knowing when to attack and when to retreat. But with her, he didn't know how to fight this battle. "I don't expect you to forgive me," he said, voice steady, "but I do expect you to give me the chance to fix what I broke." Alicia studied him, her gaze sharp, dissecting. "And how exactly do you plan to do that?" He took a slow step forward. "By proving to you that I trust you." She tilted her head slightly. "How?" "You'll see." A muscle flickered in her jaw, but she didn't push him further. The storm outside raged on, the tension between them thick with unspoken truths. And for the first time since their wedding night, Alex wasn't the one setting the rules. Alicia didn't speak to him the entire flight back. Alex had expected it. What he hadn't expected was the way his mind kept circling back to the conversation they hadn't finished. She wanted to trust him. That meant there was still something left to fight for. As soon as they landed, Alicia went straight to the Sinclair Technologies headquarters, throwing herself into work. Alex let her go without a word, knowing that pushing her now would do more harm than good. Instead, he focused on his next move. And that move started with Adrian Caldwell. Alex sat in his office, fingers tapping rhythmically against his desk as Jax, his head of security, placed a thick file in front of him. "You were right," Jax said. "The rumors about Alicia? They weren't just exaggerated, they were manufactured." Alex's expression didn't change, but something cold settled in his chest. "By who?" Jax flipped open the file, revealing a name Alex had already suspected. Adrian Caldwell, the CEO of Caldwell Innovations. A rival. A man who had spent years trying to sabotage Sinclair Technologies. And, apparently, a man who had gone to great lengths to destroy Elysia. He planted the South Africa scandal, Jax continued. Leaked falsified documents to the press, paid off sources to confirm a non-existent affair. He wanted to discredit her, make her vulnerable. And when that didn't work, he spread the rumors about her marriage. Alex finished, voice cold. Jax nodded grimly. I've also got proof that he tried to buy out a controlling stake in Sinclair Technologies right before your wedding. Alex leaned back in his chair, exhaling through his nose. It had never been about her personal life. It had always been about business. Adrian had wanted to weaken Elysia's position, to shake investor confidence, to make her an easier target. And when she married him, when she became untouchable under the Holt name, Caldwell had lost his leverage. So he had gone further, dug deeper, tried to break them from the inside. And Alex had let him. He had played right into Caldwell's hands, had believed the rumors instead of trusting the woman who now carried his name, and he had almost lost her because of it. Slowly he stood, straightening his cuffs with methodical precision. Schedule a meeting with Caldwell. Jax arched an eyebrow. Sir? I want him to know exactly what happens when he comes after what's mine. The moment Adrian saw Alex walk into his office, his smirk faltered. Mr. Holt, he greeted, recovering quickly. To what do I owe the pleasure? Alex didn't sit, didn't waste time. He simply placed the file on Adrian's desk and leaned in slightly, voice calm, lethal. You made a mistake. Adrian chuckled, feigning amusement. Did I? Alex's lips curled, but it wasn't a smile. You targeted my wife. The words were deliberate, unyielding. Adrian's expression flickered. Alex, come on, it's just business. No, Alex said smoothly. This is business. He slid a second file onto the desk. Adrian hesitated, then opened it, only for his face to pale. I assume you recognize these? Alex asked, tilting his head. Leaked documents, fraudulent transactions tied to your subsidiary in Singapore. A little unethical, don't you think? Adrian swallowed. Alex leaned in, voice dropping lower. Here's how this plays out. You step away from everything, any stake in Sinclair Technologies, any future acquisitions that interfere with my interests, any move against my wife. He smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Or I bury you. Adrian's hands curled into fists, but he didn't argue. He couldn't, because Alex always won. And now, he wasn't just fighting for power, he was fighting for her. Elysia sat by the window, sipping a glass of wine when Alex walked in. She didn't look up, but when he placed a single item on the table in front of her, her wedding ring, she stilled. Slowly, she set her glass down, eyes finally meeting his. What is this? The truth, Alex said simply. Elysia picked up the ring, turning it between her fingers. You believe me now? His jaw flexed. I should have believed you then. A long silence stretched between them. Then, Elysia, he said quietly, I trust you. Something in her gaze softened, and for the first time since their wedding, she reached for his hand. For the first time since their wedding, Elysia put the ring back on her finger. It should have felt like a victory. Alex had spent weeks trying to undo the damage he had caused, proving to her in every way he knew how that he trusted her, that he saw her not just as a business partner, but as his wife. And yet, as he watched the diamond catch the light, a strange weight settled in his chest. Because trust, once broken, was never restored overnight. And as much as he wanted to believe things had changed between them, he knew one undeniable truth. The past never stays buried. The Truman Holt Foundation's annual gala was a spectacle of wealth and influence. Held in one of Manhattan's most exclusive venues, it was the kind of event where alliances were made and enemies smiled across champagne glasses. Tonight, it also served another purpose, Alicia and Alex's first public appearance since their wedding. If there had been whispers before, they had turned into a full-blown storm now. Rumors had circulated about their marriage from the start. Was it love? Was it purely strategic? Had the Sinclair heiress tamed the untouchable Alex Holt, or was she merely another acquisition? Tonight, they would answer those questions without saying a word. Alicia stepped out of the limousine first, draped in emerald silk that hugged every line of her body. A statement dress? Powerful, undeniable. She moved with the kind of confidence that turned heads, that silenced doubters. And then Alex stepped beside her. His hand found the small of her back, a touch so effortlessly intimate that it sent a ripple through the crowd. It was calculated, of course, everything about him was. But the way Alicia leaned into him, that wasn't for show. For the first time, it wasn't an act, and the cameras caught all of it. They had barely stepped inside the venue when the tension in Alicia's shoulders shifted. Alex noticed immediately. Her mask of perfect composure remained, but he could feel the stiffness in her frame, the way her breath hitched ever so slightly. His gaze followed hers across the room. And then he saw him, Archer Caldwell. The moment he locked eyes with Alex, he smiled, not the polite, businesslike expression of a man attending a gala. No, this was something sharper, a smirk laced with history and something far more dangerous. Alex's entire body tensed. He knew who Archer was. Alicia had never spoken of him directly, but Alex had read between the lines. A man from her past, a man she had fought to forget. And now he was here, uninvited. Alex's grip on Alicia's waist tightened instinctively. Why is he here? She didn't answer right away. She was still staring at Archer, her fingers curled so tightly around the stem of her champagne glass that Alex thought it might shatter. Finally, she exhaled, voice measured. I don't know. That was a lie. It was Alex could tell. But now wasn't the time to call her out on it. Not in a room full of New York's elite, not with cameras capturing their every move. So instead, he did what he always did. He took control. His hand slid from her waist to her fingers, intertwining them as he led her toward the main ballroom. A deliberate message. She wasn't alone in this. Not anymore. Archer found them first. Of course he did. They were halfway through their second dance when he approached, cutting through the crowd like a shark scenting blood. Alex Holt, he greeted smoothly, extending a hand. I don't believe we've had the pleasure. Alex didn't move, didn't take the offered handshake. He let him feel the silence stretch between them, let him see the barely restrained fury in his gaze. Alicia was the one who finally broke it. Archer, she said, voice cold, you shouldn't be here. He smiled, completely unfazed. I was invited. I highly doubt that. New York is full of old friends, darling. You'd be surprised at how many people are so eager to welcome me back. He turned his gaze to Alex then, studying him with open curiosity. So this is the man who finally managed to put a ring on your finger. Alex's patience snapped. You have 5 seconds to explain why you're here, he said, voice low and lethal. Archer didn't so much as blink. He simply tilted his head slightly, eyes glinting with something unreadable. I came to congratulate the happy couple, of course. Alicia exhaled sharply. You don't get to do this, Archer. Not here. His smirk widened. Oh, Alicia, haven't I always? Alex stepped between them then, effectively cutting Archer off from her. A silent warning. One Archer didn't seem to take seriously. Instead, he leaned in just slightly, lowering his voice so only Alex could hear. "Be careful, Mr. Holt," he murmured. "Your wife has a habit of leaving men when they least expect it." Alex didn't hesitate. 1 second, he was standing still. The next, his fist connected with Archer's jaw. The room gasped, a crash of glass, a flurry of movement. Security rushed forward, guests whispering in stunned disbelief as Archer staggered backward, blood at the corner of his mouth. He laughed, actually laughed. And then, with one final glance at Alicia, he straightened his tie and walked away. The penthouse was silent. Alicia stood near the window, arms crossed tightly over her chest, watching the city lights blur beneath the rain-streaked glass. She hadn't spoken since they left the gala. Alex hadn't pushed. But now he needed answers. "Alicia," he said quietly. She didn't turn. "Talk to me." She exhaled, running a hand through her hair. "You shouldn't have done that." His jaw clenched. "I shouldn't have defended you? I didn't need defending." Bullshit. That made her turn. "You think punching him makes a difference? That it makes him go away?" "I think it sends a message," Alex countered. She let out a bitter laugh. "You don't know him, Alex." "No," he agreed. "But I know you." And that was the real problem, wasn't it? Because for all the walls she had built, for all the ways she had tried to keep him at a distance, he knew her. He knew the way she carried old wounds like armor, knew the way her past still haunted her, no matter how hard she tried to bury it. And now that past was back. Archer wasn't just a mistake. He was a threat, one Alex Holt would not ignore. He stepped closer, voice quieter now. "Tell me what he did to you." Alicia's throat bobbed as she swallowed, her gaze flickering with something dangerously close to fear. But more than that, anger. Not just at Archer, but at herself, for letting him still have power over her after all these years. And Alex realized, whatever Archer had done, it wasn't over, not even close. Alicia had spent years preparing for this moment, for the day Archer Caldwell would come back. She had convinced herself that it wouldn't matter, that she had buried him in her past, locked him away with every other painful memory she refused to acknowledge. And yet, here she was, standing in the middle of the penthouse, Alex's piercing gaze locked onto her, waiting for answers. "Tell me what he did to you," he repeated, voice quiet, steady. She turned away, pressing her fingers to her temples. "It doesn't matter." "The hell it doesn't," Alex snapped. "He showed up tonight at an event meant to display our strength. You froze, Alicia. That matters." She inhaled sharply, but didn't deny it, because he was right. She had frozen, not out of fear, not because she was weak, but because Archer had always been good at playing a long game. And if he was back now, it meant one thing. He wanted something. "Alicia?" Her name was softer this time, less of a demand, more of a plea. She sighed. It was never about romance. Alex's expression remained unreadable, but she saw something flicker in his eyes, something dangerous. "Explain." She walked toward the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. 3 years ago, Archer was circling my father's company, looking for a way in. Sinclair Technologies had just started securing government contracts for communications infrastructure in emerging markets, and he wanted a stake. A pause. He wanted me. Alex's entire body tensed. "He saw me as a business acquisition," she continued. "Just another deal to close, and when I refused, he didn't take it well." Alex's hands curled into fists. Define "didn't take it well"? Alicia turned then, meeting his gaze. "First it was the rumors, the affair scandal in South Africa. He paid off sources, manipulated headlines, made sure my name was dragged through the mud." Alex inhaled sharply. He had seen the damage firsthand, had nearly believed the lies himself. The thought made his stomach twist. When that didn't work, he went further, she said. Boardroom sabotage, bribing executives, trying to push my father into a corner. And when that didn't work, she hesitated. Then, he threatened me. Silence, the kind that carried weight, thick and suffocating. Alex stepped forward, his voice quieter now, but no less sharp. What kind of threats? Elysia shook her head. It doesn't matter. It does. A beat of hesitation. Then, he said that if I didn't agree to his terms, he'd make sure I had nothing left to protect, that my father's company would fall, that I would be ruined. Alex swore under his breath. Elysia! I handled it. That made him pause. She crossed her arms, her posture straightening. I found a way to secure Sinclair Technologies. I locked him out of the market. And when my father got sick, I knew I had to do something more permanent. She let out a breath. That's when I agreed to marry you. The words hung between them, heavy and unspoken. Alex had always known their marriage was a strategy. But now? Now he saw the real reason behind it. She hadn't just married him for the business advantages. She had married him to keep Archer Caldwell out of her life. His jaw clenched. So that's why he's back now, because our marriage ruined whatever plans he had for you. Elysia nodded. And Archer Caldwell doesn't like to lose. Neither did Alex. His mind was already moving, calculating. If Archer had come back, it meant he had leverage. It meant he had found an opening somewhere, an opportunity to strike. And Alex wasn't about to let him. He stepped closer, his hand brushing against hers, his voice low, deliberate. He won't touch you. Her breath hitched. You can't promise that. Yes, Alex said, voice like steel. I can. Because if Archer wanted a war, Alex would make damn sure he lost everything. They barely had 24 hours before Archer made his next move. It happened outside Sinclair Technologies headquarters just after Elysia's morning meetings. She had stepped outside with Phoenix, her closest friend and head of security, when the black SUV came out of nowhere. No headlights, no warning, just a roar of tires as it barreled toward them. The driver had one goal, her. Everything happened in seconds. Phoenix shoved her out of the way, sending her crashing onto the pavement as the car swerved. It barely missed them, screeching into oncoming traffic before disappearing down the street. A hit-and-run attempt. No, an assassination attempt. By the time Alex arrived, sirens filled the air, police officers blocking off the street as reporters swarmed the scene. And then he saw her. Elysia was sitting on the curb, blood trickling from a cut on her temple. Phoenix crouched beside her. Alex's chest tightened. He moved instantly, brushing past the officers, reaching for her. Elysia! She looked up, eyes flashing with frustration rather than fear. I'm fine. She wasn't. There was blood. There was tension in her muscles. She had nearly been killed, and she was acting like it was just another business inconvenience. Alex turned to Phoenix. Did you see the driver? Phoenix exhaled sharply. Tinted windows. No plates? Alex's jaw clenched. Caldwell. We can't prove that, Elysia muttered. Alex ignored her. He pulled out his phone, dialing Jax. I want every resource on this. Find the driver. Find the car. Find him. Elysia sighed, standing up. Alex, we... No, he cut her off, his voice sharp. Her eyes widened slightly. He exhaled, voice lower this time. This isn't business, Elysia. This isn't some corporate war. He reached out, brushing his fingers over the cut on her forehead, his touch unexpectedly gentle. You could have died. Something in her expression shifted, a moment of vulnerability, a moment of hesitation, and then her shoulders straightened. I don't want to run, Alex studied her. You won't have to. A pause. Then, Elysia, he murmured, I need you to trust me. She swallowed, and for the first time she did. Alex Holt didn't just retaliate, he obliterated. By nightfall, he had Caldwell cornered, a secret offshore account exposed, a series of fraudulent investments unearthed, and a direct link between Caldwell's company and the black SUV used in the attack. Alex didn't waste time. He arranged a meeting, one final conversation. And when Caldwell walked into Alex's office the next day, he realized he had already lost. "You made a mistake," Alex said, standing behind his desk, fingers steepled together. Caldwell scoffed. "Did I?" Alex leaned forward. "You came after my wife." A pause. Then, "You won't walk away from this." And as security escorted Caldwell out of the building, Alex knew this wasn't over, not yet. But when he returned home that night, Alicia was waiting. Her ring was still on, and when he reached for her, she didn't pull away. For the first time, she let herself fall, and for the first time, Alex caught her. Alicia had spent her entire life preparing for war. Not the kind fought with guns and soldiers, but the kind fought in boardrooms, in whispered negotiations, in the silent, brutal game of power where one wrong move could cost everything. And tonight was the end game. She stood in front of the mirror, adjusting the delicate clasp of her diamond earrings. Her reflection was composed, unreadable, the same expression she had perfected over years of battles fought behind closed doors. But beneath the mask, she felt it, the weight of everything that had led to this moment. Behind her, Alex leaned against the doorway, watching. "You're thinking too much." She met his gaze in the mirror. "I always think too much." "Not tonight." Alicia turned to face him. "Caldwell isn't done." "No," Alex agreed, "but neither are we." Chucked. It started at exactly 8 a.m. the next morning. The Sinclair Technologies boardroom was full, every seat occupied, every executive present, waiting for the battle that was about to unfold. Archer Caldwell sat at the far end of the table, calm, too calm. He smirked when Alicia entered, his fingers drumming lightly against the polished wood. "Alicia," he greeted smoothly, "I was wondering when you'd make an appearance." She slid into her chair, perfectly poised. "You won't have to wonder much longer." A murmur rippled through the room, tension thick in the air. Archer sighed dramatically. "All this hostility, it's unnecessary. Really, I came here to talk about business." Alex leaned forward, voice lethal. "You don't have a business anymore." Silence. Archer's smirk faltered. Alicia tilted her head. "You didn't think we'd come unprepared, did you?" Alex placed a thick folder onto the table, the kind of folder that ended careers. "Let's talk about your offshore accounts," he said, his voice cold. "The ones you tried to hide behind shell companies, the ones tied to money laundering, fraud, and bribery." Archer's fingers twitched. Alex continued, unfazed. "Let's also discuss your direct link to last week's assassination attempt." The room erupted. Executives murmured in shock, voices rising as they processed what had just been said. Caldwell forced a laugh, shaking his head. "This is a joke." "No," Alicia said smoothly, crossing one leg over the other. "This is checkmate." A beat of silence. Then the doors opened and 2 men stepped inside. Federal agents. Archer's face went pale. "This is a private meeting," he snapped. One of the agents stepped forward, pulling out a warrant. "Mr. Caldwell, you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit corporate espionage, attempted murder, and financial crimes." A stunned silence settled over the boardroom. Alex sat back in his chair, watching as security stepped forward to remove Caldwell from the premises. Archer's furious gaze locked onto Alicia. "This isn't over," he snarled. She smiled, a slow, knowing smile. "Yes, Archer, it is." The moment he was dragged from the room, the dam broke. Board members erupted in conversation, shock and speculation filling the air. But Elysia? She just breathed. It was over. Alex leaned in, voice low. "How does it feel?" She exhaled, the smallest trace of a smile ghosting her lips. "Like winning." They didn't go back to the office after the meeting. Instead, Alex drove them out of the city, past the glass towers and endless traffic, into the quieter stretch of coastline where the world felt slower. Elysia sat in silence, staring out at the waves crashing against the shore. He let her have the quiet. For someone who had spent her entire life fighting, she didn't know what to do with peace. Finally, she turned to him. "It's strange." "What is?" "Not having to look over my shoulder anymore." Alex studied her. "You've been looking over your shoulder for too long." Elysia didn't argue, because it was true. She had spent years anticipating war, preparing for the next attack, for the next betrayal. And now there was nothing left to fight. The thought terrified her more than she wanted to admit. Alex's voice softened. "You're allowed to let it go." She inhaled deeply, closing her eyes. "I don't know how." He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "Then let me show you." That night, in the quiet of their penthouse, Alex pulled something from his pocket. Her wedding ring. She had put it back on after the attack, but now he wanted her to make the choice. He turned it over in his fingers before placing it in her palm. "No contracts this time," he said softly. "No obligations, just us." Elysia stared at the ring, her heart pounding. They had spent so much time pretending their marriage was nothing more than strategy. Pretending trust could be negotiated like a business deal. Pretending that this, whatever this was, wasn't real. But now Alex was asking her to make the choice, her own choice. Slowly, she slipped the ring back onto her finger, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. And when Alex leaned in, pressing his lips against hers. It felt like the first time, not a contract, not a deal, just them. Real. The following week, the headlines were everywhere. Archer Caldwell arrested in corporate espionage scandal. Elysia Sinclair and Alex Holt, power couple or something more? The marriage that started as a business deal, but is it still just that? Elysia ignored most of them, because for once, she didn't care what the world thought. She was too busy rediscovering what it meant to live, to breathe, to wake up in the morning without calculating her next move, without waiting for the next battle, and to wake up next to him. One evening, as they stood on the balcony overlooking the city, Alex wrapped an arm around her waist. "You know," he murmured, "I think I'm starting to enjoy being married." Elysia smirked. "Oh? And here I thought you saw it as an inconvenience." His lips brushed against her temple. "Not anymore." She turned to face him fully, studying the man who had once been her greatest adversary, her most complicated gamble. Now he was something else, something real. She exhaled. "Me too." For the first time in years, the future wasn't a battlefield. It was theirs. And as Alex leaned in, kissing her under the soft glow of the city lights, Elysia knew this wasn't the end of their story. It was just the beginning. For the first time in her life, Elysia Sinclair wasn't fighting. She wasn't strategizing her next move, anticipating an attack, or calculating what she needed to sacrifice to survive. She was simply existing. Existing in a world where Archer Caldwell was no longer a shadow looming over her. Existing in a marriage that had started as a contract but had transformed into something entirely different. Existing in his space, with him. And the strangest part? She wasn't afraid anymore. The weeks that followed Caldwell's arrest were a blur of media frenzy, corporate restructuring, and carefully orchestrated public statements. Sinclair Technologies and Holt Enterprises had never been stronger. Their stocks soared. Their companies flourished. The board members who had once doubted their union now treated them as the ultimate power couple. But behind the business headlines, something far more important was happening. Elysia was learning what it meant to trust, to let go, to allow someone to stand beside her, not just as an ally, but as something more. She wasn't sure when it had truly shifted, when Alex Holt had stopped being the man she had married for power and started being the man she needed. Maybe it had been that night in the lake house when the hurricane had forced them to strip away their facades. Maybe it had been in Singapore when she thought she had lost him and realized how much she had to lose. Or maybe it had been in the way he looked at her now, like she was his, not an asset, not an acquisition, but something irreplaceable. It was a quiet Sunday morning when she found him in the study, reading over financial reports. He barely looked up when she walked in, murmuring a distracted, "Good morning, Mrs. Holt." Elysia smirked. "Still not tired of calling me that?" Not even a little. She leaned against the doorway, watching him for a long moment. Then, "I want to take my father's company private." That got his attention. Alex set the papers down, tilting his head slightly. "You want to buy out the remaining shareholders?" She nodded. "I've been thinking about it for a while. With Caldwell out of the picture, the board is stable, but Sinclair Technologies is still vulnerable to outside investors. If we take it private, I can restructure it the way I want, without interference." His gaze sharpened, already calculating the logistics. It was a bold move, an expensive one, but Alex had never been a man to shy away from risk. He studied her. "And what do you want?" Elysia hesitated, because for the first time, she wasn't thinking about shareholders or quarterly profits. She was thinking about something far more terrifying, something that had nothing to do with business. "You," she admitted, the words slipping out before she could stop it. The silence between them stretched, heavy and charged. Then Alex stood, closing the distance between them in 3 long strides. His fingers brushed over her jaw, tilting her chin up so she had no choice but to meet his gaze. "You already have me," he murmured. Her breath hitched, because for once she believed him. They didn't talk about marriage in the way normal couples did. They had started at the finish line, skipped the proposal, the romance, the build-up of falling in love. But now, it felt like they were circling back. It happened late one evening in the quiet of their penthouse. Elysia was sitting on the balcony, wineglass in hand, when Alex sat beside her, his expression unreadable. Then, "I never actually asked you to marry me," she blinked. "You did, in a boardroom, over legal documents?" He exhaled, shaking his head. "That doesn't count." She smirked. "Well, it was very romantic." "Elysia?" His voice was softer now, more serious. When she turned to look at him, he was already reaching into his pocket. Her breath caught, because she knew what he was about to do. And yet, when he pulled out a small velvet box, her heart stopped. "Elysia Sinclair," Alex said, flipping it open to reveal a new ring. Not the one she already wore, not the one that had come with their contract. This one was different, smaller, simpler, but infinitely more real. "I don't want to be your business partner," he said. "I don't want to be your strategic advantage. I don't want a contract between us." He reached for her hand, threading their fingers together. "I just want you." A lump formed in her throat. "Alex, I love you." The words were so effortless, so natural, that it knocked the air from her lungs. He had said it before, but this time there was no hesitation, no doubt, no walls between them. "Elysia," he continued, voice steady, "will you marry me? For real this time?" For the first time in her life, she didn't think. She didn't analyze or strategize or weigh the risks. She just felt, and the feeling was undeniable. Yes, the moment the word left her lips, Alex pulled her into him, his mouth crashing onto hers with a desperation that sent her pulse spiraling. This kiss wasn't careful. It wasn't controlled. It was them. Messy, unpredictable, unbreakable. And when he slid the ring onto her finger, Alicia knew. This time, it wasn't a deal. It was a promise. The headlines didn't call it a power merger anymore. They called it something else. Holt and Sinclair, the power couple who built an empire together. A love story that started as a business deal and turned into something real. Alex Holt and Alicia Sinclair, the unbreakable union. Alicia smiled as she closed the magazine, setting it down beside her. She wasn't in New York anymore. She was sitting on the balcony of their lake house, watching the waves roll in. A year ago, she had been standing in this very spot, thinking about war, about strategy, about survival. Now she was thinking about forever. Behind her, Alex walked out onto the balcony, pressing a kiss to the back of her neck. "You keep reading that article," he murmured. "Something you want to tell me?" She smirked. "I like seeing you referred to as a romantic." He chuckled, wrapping his arms around her waist. "I prefer ruthless billionaire." She turned in his embrace, tilting her head. "And yet, here you are, happily married." Alex smirked. "To the only woman ruthless enough to keep up with me." Her laughter was soft but real, and as they stood there, wrapped in each other, Alicia knew. They had rewritten their story, not as a contract, not as a transaction, but as something far stronger, something that had survived betrayal, deception, and war, something unbreakable.